Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Fly to the Past. In today's video we're going to be taking a quick look at a improvement mod for the Boeing 307 Stratoliner. This airplane has been sitting in my hangar for quite some time, as I haven't flown it, haven't really been happy with the performance of it, but recently there was an improvement mod that came out on flightsim.to that really woke this airplane up and made me want to start flying again. So today we're going to go on a flight from LaGuardia to Chicago. This is TWA Flight 7. And as we're going along, we'll talk about that mod, the different things that it changes, as well as a little bit of history about the 307. So climb aboard, join us as we go across the country to Chicago in the Stratoliner. Without further ado, we'll climb aboard and get started. So here we are aboard our Stratoliner, and as I mentioned in the intro, there were some things that I just didn't sit right with me on the 307 when I first flew it, and I think that was the sentiment of a lot of people when this airplane came out. If you peruse the forums for Flight Simulator and various other places, there's a general consensus that the performance just was not there. This airplane was touted as being the fastest, highest flying airplane at the time in the real world, and the performance here in the sim just did not match that. And there were some other things that were messed up, such as the fuel system and various other things, and this improvement mod has fixed a lot of those things. Really his goal, and I'll read through some of that as we go along, but really his goal was to improve the things that were broken, and then his phase 2 plan is to tweak the realism and make it more realistic to what the 307 should have been in the sim, how it should have came out originally. And even just this phase 1, he has updated it once since it came out earlier this past week. Just this first phase already improves it tremendously. He's added second stage superchargers, which automatically kick in at 10,000 feet, so you can actually climb up to 20,000 feet. The pressurization system he modified a little bit. The fuel system he worked on. So many things that have been improved on, which we'll get into and talk in more depth here in a minute. But for now, let's get this old girl fired up. We're going to reach down here, and it's a little bit tricky to get this switch. This is the battery switch. If you flip it up, it goes to your ground power. And we'll come up here to this switch under the red light. And that's our inverters for our gauges, or gauge power. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my refuel and my services. What that'll do, if you saw in the intro, the fuel truck that was out front, and our door and boarding stairs as well, that will turn those off. So we'll go back to our flight engineer panel. I'm going to use Control 9 to do that. He's made a new view for that. So we have our crossfeed valves here, which are in the off position for our takeoff. We have our fuel gauges there, or fuel valves, excuse me. We'll turn those to the main tanks to start. And this is one of the things that he has spent a lot of time working on. I say he, I don't actually know. I assume they're he or she. I apologize if I said the wrong thing there. But the person that modified this airplane goes by Nixon Redgrave on the Flight Sim forums, and the mod is listed under Redgrave Redux on flightsim.to. So we've got a fuel on back here. We'll go back up to our pilot's view here, and we'll start the engines in the order of 3, 4, 2, and 1, which I believe is pretty standard for these 4-engine radial airplanes. It's the same way you do it in the DC-6. It's the same way they do it in the Constellation. So we're going to do it the same way in the Stratoliner. Let's do that. Let me find my view here. There's our radios. There we go. Control 7. So I'm going to turn the boost pump on for number 3. Check down here. We should have our fuel pressure. See our fuel pressure gauge there at 10 psi with the fuel booster pump on. We'll come up here. Start switches are up here. The down, you can't really see it with that red bar in the way, but it says engine number 3 here, so down position is for engine number 3, up is for 4, up is 1, and down is 2 for this side as well. So fuel booster pump is on, and you're only supposed to use these one at a time. You don't really want to turn all of them on at once. We'll go ahead and engage our starter, booster, and primer. And we'll go with our mags on. And our mixtures can go to full rich. And there she fired up. Get it up to 1,000 RPM here. I do hope that he modifies that start sequence up because, and I believe he is working on that just from the forum posts he's put out there. You notice the sound doesn't really start at the right time, so it's kind of odd. If we would have looked outside, you would have seen the propeller spinning over with the starter engaged, which I'll try to show you on engine 4 start. But it's a little odd on the timing of sounds, but a minor detail. Fuel boost off for number 3. We got good fuel pressure. We've got oil temps are coming up. We got oil pressure over here for engine number 3. So that's all looking good. Good start on 3. And we can take the booster and the primer off. Now, as is typical on these old radial engine airplanes, the primer squirts a jet of fuel, of atomized fuel, usually into the mouth of the supercharger, which then ducts it into the carburetor to get it started. The booster is usually an ignition booster, and that sends a shower of sparks via one of the magnetos so that it can fire before you click your mags on. So the start procedure is a little bit off here, but it does work. Fuel pump on for number 4. Confirm we do have fuel pressure there, 10 psi. And we'll click starter, boost, primer. You can see our prop's turning, but we have no start sounds until we flick the mags on. Engine 4 is on. We'll get it up to 1,000 RPM as well. Got oil pressure coming up there. And we'll take our booster pump off. Trying to boost off there. Good start on 4. And now we'll just do the same thing for 2 and 1. Alright, so we've got all 4 engines running now, idling at 1,000 RPM. All our fuel pump switches are off, booster prime switches are off there. And we can go ahead and take this and flick it all the way down, and that switches to our ship battery and removes our ground power. Turn our avionics on as well. It's our radios and all that. Landing lights come on. Landing lights, nav lights. Wait, take the landing lights on. So if you've never flown the Stratoliner, you maybe don't know about this situation up here with our avionics. Right now I have it turned to the old school navigation with the VORs. You can switch that with this switch right here. And you can see we have our 2 Garmin units. I believe this is a 530 and then a 430 up top. And just to avoid any issues, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and initialize those. But I do not plan to be using those for this flight. I like the old school navigation better. But there are some issues that can sometimes pop up. I know that happens in the DC6 a lot, where the GPS sometimes messes with the autopilot and causes problems with you trying to follow a localizer and things of that nature. So we're just going to try to mitigate that at the very start. You also have two autopilots in this airplane, which is a little strange. You have the Sperry gyro pilot here in the middle of the instrument panel, which is period correct. And you also have the Cap 140 that's stock in the sim, a lot of airplanes have. You can use either or to use the autopilot in this airplane. I believe he's worked on a couple of things with the Sperry unit here, where you can use this to supply power, this white knob here, to supply power to it, instead of like in the DC3, it has a power button on the face of it. So we may play around with that a little bit. I actually haven't tried to use that yet. So we're waiting on this to warm up here. We're going to go ahead and get down to my radios here. Let's see, there we go. And I'm going to tune in a couple VORs to get us started. Let's say we're on the ground in LaGuardia. It's actually the Red Wing 1935 mod, so it is not LaGuardia yet. I believe LaGuardia opened in 1939, so about 4 years ahead of that. Which you're going to have to suspend your belief a little bit here because our timeline is off. The Stratoliner didn't fly until 39 as well. We're playing around with time a little bit today. I'm going to tune the Allentown VOR on 7.5. Here, 7.5 on nav 1. And the next one I'm going to load is Phillipsburg 115.5. I'll put that on nav 2. And I'll also load it in standby. Nav 1. And that should get us a good ways along here. Out over Pennsylvania. And I'm going to go ahead and put Youngstown, Ohio in standby on nav 2. That is 109.0. So that should get us well along over Ohio at least. And we should be good to go. So you can see our oil temp gauges down here. 1, 2, 3, and 4 warming up nicely. So their head temps are going to come up here shortly. We'll taxi out and do a run-up. So I will come back to you when we're ready to do that. Alright, so here we are at the end of our runway here. 27. And we're going to do a quick run up. So I'm going to just do 2 at a time, 2 engines at a time. First check we want to do is our propeller system. Pulls it back to 1000 RPM again. We're taxiing with a little bit higher RPM. Seems like she wants to stick to the ground. go up to our left two engines, up to about 1500 RPM, and cycle the propellers. Go. Cycle the props here. Do that twice. And what that's doing is, one, it's ensuring that we have full range of motion in our propellers, but it's also getting warm oil into the propeller speed unit and the pistons in the hub of the propeller assembly that actually turn those blades. We're going to do the same thing for the feathering system here. We're going to hit our feathering buttons one at a time, and as soon as it drops, we don't want to let it drop too far. As soon as it drops, we'll disengage them and make sure it becomes unfeathered. So I'll do that for engine 1 here. See it drop. Turn that back off. It should be unfeathered. I think you have to jiggle the... There we go. You gotta jiggle your prop lever there to get it to come unfeathered. Much like the Beech 18. And engine 2. There's our drop. Unfeather. And back up. Normally what you'd also be doing is you'd be looking at your ammeter to see your voltage drop. And that would tell you that you're getting good electrical current to your feathering pump, as well as the RPM drop being an indication of that. So that's our propeller checks there. We'll go up to 30 inches on our left-hand engines. There's 30 inches. We'll check our magnetos. What we're looking for is just a drop in RPM. There's a good drop. Back to both. And our left mags. Good drop there. Back to both. Engine 2. Good drop there. And a drop there. Back to both. Double checking all our temperatures here. Hard to see some of them. So carb temp there's oil temp, cylinder head temp good. Oil pressure is good. Fuel pressure is good. We can pull those back to 1000 RPM. As always, being gentle on our old radials. Not doing abrupt power changes. The engines like it when we do that. You treat them nice, they'll treat you nice. So, same thing on the right hand side, up to 1500 RPM. Alright, so for takeoff, we're gonna go to full power, 45 inches manifold pressure. We should be getting around 2500 RPM. First, we'll check our controls, go back, forward, left and right, right. Okay. Turn our fasten seatbelts and no smoking signs on. Let the flight attendants know to prepare for takeoff. Everything is set up back here. Cross feed is off. Takeoff as it should be. We are ready to roll. Props are full forward. Mixture is rich. Parking brake is off. And we'll go into full power. I'll hold the brakes just for a minute. Just 30 inches. And release the brakes. Make sure the channel's not too shift G for blocking the tail wheel. There's full power. So straight. Bit of brake. Rudder. There we go. So tail coming up. Rudder is squirrely today. There we go. And we'll let her fly off. And then you're gonna come up. little bit squirrely takeoff. You have to forgive me. It's been a minute since I've flown this old girl. So coming up on 300 feet, we'll go to METO power. Be 2,400 and inches. There's METO. 500 feet, we can go to climb, which is 2,200. Go to 35 inches of manifold pressure. Have to keep pulling that or pushing that up as we climb. Here. Okay, start making a left-hand turn here as we're climbing. Try to climb at about 120. Should give us about 1,000 feet a minute. There's New York there, Manhattan off our nose. Coming around here, we'll fly over Newark, on towards Allentown, and so on until we reach Chicago. So as we're climbing up here, talk a little bit about the mod and what was changed. Get the course here real quick before I start talking about that. This way. Overcorrected just a little bit. Because technically we would be making radio calls to be able to fly over this section of New York, but today we're ignoring ATC, doing it our own way. Fashioned. So there's about the course. Keep that climb going. Dial in our course here. Hopefully this will work for me and not completely mess things up. About 260. Gauge that. Doesn't really seem to work. I'm just not sure how to. Oh, there we go. That turned it on. So I guess you have to roll this switch here, which is the aileron. Yeah, that's the aileron switch to turn on your heading mode. Interesting. So everything looking good. We're climbing up 4,000 feet. Keep that climb going. We're going to go up to 20,000 feet today. Just here. Alright, so as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about some things that mod fixes here. And you can find all this again on flightsim.to. It is, if you just search Boeing 307 mod, it'll come up. Or the name of the mod is actually Redgrave Redux. Boeing 307 Stratoliner Improvement Model. So that's the full name of that. But let's talk about some things that it improves as we're climbing up here to 20,000 feet. So his purpose says he wants to fix various bugs, issues, and implement base systems in the Boeing 307 Stratoliner. And phase 2 is baking some state saving and realism for an enhanced simulation experience. And I think he is close to being done with phase 1 now, which fixes these things. Scroll down here. First things on release version 1.0, which has been updated, I believe. Just updated it a moment ago. Is he altered the altimeter's faceplate to replace a 6 with an 8. So here on the 8, you see it was a 6, so let's fix that. Altered the right outboard fuel gauge so that it displays the correct level of fuel. That was incorrect in the original. Altered the fuel selector valve so that the main feeds from the main tanks and inboard extra feeds from the inboard extra tanks. Those were messed up on the original. And then altered the fuel selector valves such that they are in the off position by default. Now, version 2.0, which incorporates the version 1 fixes. Turn here to a different heading. Still struggling with this spare. It's very interesting. Make a right turn here. See if it straightens out on the heading that I want. If it doesn't, we may have problems. Oh no, it's straightened out. Okay. So that is how that works. You have to dial it in with this, the rudder knob, then use your aileron to turn it. So I'm actually just a little bit more. Through 7,400. I'll need to be paying attention because the superchargers automatically kick in at 10,000 feet, so I'll have to back the power off so we don't overboost your engines. And I was not paying attention and not keeping up with throttle. So now we're at full throttle at about 8,000 feet, which is pretty normal for these airplanes. So speaking of that, going back to our improvement mod, here's the things he's done to his engines. He reworked engine performance to match the GR 1820-97 as installed in Stratoliner serial number 2003 from 1954. Serial number 2003, that is the only Stratoliner that is complete left in existence. Out of the 10 built, there's only one complete one left, and one fuselage, which was turned into a houseboat. I believe is now owned by Kermit Weeks. So he owns that now. So he did that, he fixed the engine performance. He also added a 2-stage supercharger, which was what the TWA aircraft had. The Pan Am aircraft had a different version of the 1820. So they did not have 2-stage superchargers with a shift lever, but he has added those to automatically shift to 10,000 feet. We're coming up on 9,000 feet now. So go ahead and back off the power now so I don't miss it. Back off to about 28 inches, so we'll overboost. here in about 30 seconds. We should see those automatically switch at 10,000 feet. A note that he left here says Pan Am pilots stated the 307 was designed to take off with full throttle at sea level. They noted that takeoff performance was a challenge at high altitude. So again, Pan Am did not have the two-stage superchargers on theirs. I think Pan Am ordered 3 aircraft. PWA had 5. Howard Hughes had 1, which is the fuselage that's left. So here we are coming up on 10,000 feet. Watch our manifold pressure gauges here as it shifts. There's our shift. See that? Full power available again. Back it off to 35 inches. And keep going all the way up to 20,000. So going back to our improvement mod list, he increased carburetor icing effect, implemented an engine primer, altered the feathering system to place the prop levers into a negative value to allow it to actually function properly, feathered, which it did not do in the original. Increased the stopped engine friction to prevent a feathered prop from slowly windmilling the engine. He also altered the feathering system to maintain high pitch position when unfeathering to allow for a realistic in-air engine start. So it allows for that. He reworked the engine start code, adding a little bit of cranking startup time, as if you've flown it before the mod, you will remember the startup was almost instantaneous. It's very odd. So he fixed that, added vacuum pumps to all engines, so now you have vacuum. He tweaked the flight model a little bit to reduce the need to overuse the nose down trim, and he enabled the cabin pressurization on engines 2 and 3 and set to 18 psi to simulate the cabin superchargers. So the way this cabin supercharger system worked is at 8,000 feet they would start pressurizing and try to maintain 12,000 foot cabin altitude at 20,000 feet, because at the time they didn't see it necessary to have oxygen at 12,000 feet as they do now. So that was how that pressurization worked. Also, he edited the vertical speed indicator on the flight engineer's panel to show the cabin's rate of change rather than the aircraft's vertical rate of change. We can go back there and show you here real quick. Go to, so we see we're at 1,000 feet per minute here, but the aircraft's actually climbing it. Back here, see our rate of change now is pretty much 0. So a very slow rate of change. We should be pressurized at around 8,000. So he's fixed all that. Implemented the blower discharge pressure. Reworked the electrical system. Upgraded the generators from a 50 amp to a 200 amp generators. And tuned the curves to prevent significant charging below 1200 RPM, which is how they would actually work in real life. Separated the buses for the generators so you have separate ones in each engine. Created an AC bus and connected the AC instrumentation like the gyros, the cockpit lighting, and avionics. Enabled inverter switches to power AC bus, which is that first switch we flipped, which is right over here. That is our inverter switch. What else do you do here? Different voltmeter on the flight engineer's panel to indicate the actual voltage. Recoded landing gear control lock warning lamp. Trigger when extended on ground rather than when retracted in air. Fixed the panel and compass lighting. Rewired compass light switch. Fixed the transponder display. And fixed low oil pressure annunciators. Fuel system fixes. So much stuff. He actually reworked the crossfeed to allow a shared wing pair of engines, so you can feed engines 1 and 2 off of the same tank. So that what that allows you to do is, if let's say engine 1's fuel pump failed, that would allow you to run engine 1 off of engine 2's fuel pump, so you don't lose an engine. So he's added that. He redesigned the fuel dump system, flow at a specified dump rate, and only dump and limited fuel dump to the main tanks only, as it was at Boeing. Enabled mixture control. He's implemented a hydraulic system, hydraulic boosted elevator and rudder, which the 307 did have. It was one of the first airplanes to really implement that system. De-icing system, a whole bunch of other stuff. And I cannot say enough about how much this mod really woke this airplane up. I mean, as you can see, we're climbing quite well. 1,000 feet a minute still, maintaining that. We're up already at 15,000 feet. In the previous rendition of this aircraft, I would have already been at the stops on the throttles and maybe pushing, oh gosh, 25 inches of manifold pressure maybe, and struggling to climb. I would have been climbing at less than 500 feet a minute at this point. So huge improvement, massive improvement of this aircraft. Not say enough about this mod. It really made me want to fly this aircraft again, and hopefully, as you can see the amount of stuff that's been done, this will inspire you to also dust it off from your virtual hangar if you've already got it, or maybe purchase it and download this mod if you enjoy vintage airliners. This is a very unique and really pivotal aircraft design, and it's unfortunate there aren't any more than just one left out there, because it's a very iconic aircraft. Yeah, those are just the things that have been done so far on the mod. His Phase 2 plans are also extensive. He plans to refine the flight model more, fix some gyro pilot issues, rework, which he's already done actually in his update, rework the carpeet levers so that it's not a knob, so that whereas before, I'll show you here, before you would have to scroll and it would be very slow. Now you can grab a hold of it. That's the mixture of that. There we go. Grab a hold of it and slide it up to get carb heat. Whereas before it was an incremental, much like, for example, light switches. Something like that. So much better now, not as awkward to use. He plans to implement auto-rich and auto-lean mixture modes, which we currently don't have. And a bunch of other stuff to fine-tune and add realism. He's got his work cut out for him. I personally don't know a thing about modifying these airplanes, so I can't imagine the level of work this is taking for him. But I genuinely appreciate and applaud the work that he's doing to make this aircraft better. Truly love it. So we're coming up on about 17,300 right now. A few more thousand feet to go. Try to dial in just a little bit more climb. Still maintaining 120. I'm doing a very good job of following my bar here. Trying to get that tuned in. Where it's supposed to be. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn on the app if I can. Turn this off. There we go. That brings that back on. On. Nav. That should follow our radial. Very good. The Cat 140 is a little bit easier to use. This type of stuff, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick with that. Take the workload down a little bit. We've got a long flight ahead of us. So as we're climbing up, I'll let you enjoy some scenery. We'll come back when we're getting close to descent and talk a little bit about the history of the 307 and really just enjoy this mod. It's a cool mod. So I'm going to sit back and relax, enjoy the flight, and we'll catch you in just a little bit. 307 Stratoliner. We're in the middle of our cruise right now. We're about halfway through the flight. Just over Lake Erie. Right wing here. Thought I'd show off the interior here. This is one of the views that was added in the improvement line, looking out over the wing here. Got our two engines, 3 and 4, two right 1820s. This beautiful interior here, our Stratoliner. A little fun fact, it was designed by Raymond Loewy. He's famous for all sorts of designs that he did. Coke bottle that we're all familiar with. The various train designs that he did. He worked for Studebaker for a while, and International as well. A lot of different things. So he designed this interior. Very nice. Let's go back up to our cockpit here. Quick walk up there. Cruising along at 20,000 feet and about 170 miles an hour indicated, which works out to be just about 200 knots over the ground. Right now, got a little bit of a headwind. We're doing okay on fuel. I was just checking that earlier. Back to our flight department here. We're doing okay on fuel. We're burned out on our outboard extras. To just about 20 gallons left on each side, 24 gallons. And burning out of our main tanks now. Which obviously that's not happening because I had an issue with the sim and it crashed and I had to redo everything, so those won't turn off. They are now. I also experienced a little bit of a failure. I was back here checking the fuel beforehand and noticed that my cabin pressure vertical speed was at -500. That's weird, so I went to this view and realized my autopilot was off and realized I had forgot to turn on my generators. So I got those selected on and recovered electrical power. So that's just one of the realistic changes that the improvement mod adds, is actually needing to check out your electrical system, make sure it's all working correctly, or you will drain your batteries. So that was interesting. Don't do that. Turn those on before you take off. While we're cruising here, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the history of the Stratoliner. First flight was in 38, prototype, and unfortunately that prototype did crash, and I believe it was March of 39. And what happened was the original prototype had a smaller vertical stabilizer than the current model. It was much like the early B-17s, if you're familiar with those. There is the Swoose is a famous one that's still around. I believe that's at the Air Force Museum in Dayton. But it had a smaller tail on it. And KLM was in, the Dutch airline KLM, that is, was in the process of trying to buy some of these Stratoliners from Boeing. And they were doing a demonstration flight. And one of KLM's requirements was that it could run on 2 engines. So if the engine failed, 2 engines failed, it could still fly. The KLM representative asked him to shut down 2 engines and demonstrate that. So the test pilot did. And while doing some maneuvers with 2 engines shut down, they entered a spin. Now they recovered from the spin, but in the process of trying to pull out, the wings were sheared off, and due to the G-loads of the pull-out, and it crashed into the ground belly first, and the resulting impact killed everyone on board. There was the KLM representative, Boeing's test pilot, a couple of TWA representatives, I believe, and other Boeing executives. I think it was 13 people. Could be wrong on that. but they all unfortunately passed away in that crash, and the prototype was lost. And they analyzed that crash and realized what the problem was that smaller vertical stabilizer. So they added a fin in front, which is the tail we have now on the Stratoliner. They beefed it up and tried to mitigate that issue, which helped, and they flew pretty well after that. Now they made 10 of these total, that's including the prototype, so the prototype lost, there was 9 they built. The first one was sold to Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes had planned to use that on a around the world trip. He was going to try to break his own record that he set in a Lockheed Electra. But September 1939, of course, Poland was invaded by Germany, and World War II started, so that record attempt was canceled. And that aircraft sat around for quite some time until it was sold to somebody else. Now Howard Hughes did outfit it with his own personal touches, removed the extra fuel tanks, all those things. And at one point in his ownership, he did put R2600, right, twin cyclones on it, same engine that's on the B-25. And then it went to Florida. Somebody bought it in Florida, and it was destroyed in a hurricane in the 60s. And somebody bought it for very little money and cut the tail off, cut the wings off, and turned the fuselage into a houseboat. And that is the fuselage that's still around that Kermit Weeks just recently bought. And it's in his Fantasy Flight Museum in Florida, just outside of Orlando. So that was the first one that was sold. Then Pan Am bought 3, and TWA bought 5. So we're currently flying a TWA version, trying to replicate that. And this was TWA Flight 7 that we're on. LaGuardia to Chicago. Eventually this flight would be an across-country transcontinental flight. They would go to Chicago, I believe, Kansas City, Missouri, Albuquerque, and then Burbank. So all the way across the country. And they could do this in 2 hours less than a DC-3 could do it. So big difference for people trying to get all the way across the country. And TWA pretty much kept their Stratoliners on this transcontinental route at the time when they owned them. Pan Am, on the other hand, was more diverse in their routes for the Stratoliner. They had it on their South American routes, bouncing around down there, because they were interested in their airplane because it would service those routes. It would actually be able to fly up over the Andes, up over the mountains, whereas before the airplanes they had, DC-3s and like, would have to snake their way through canyons and couldn't make it over the mountains. So that's why Pan Am bought theirs, and the only complete aircraft, serial number 2003, is a Pan Am aircraft. So it does not have the dual-stage superchargers. It has a different flap layout. Instead of the slotted flaps like the TAWA aircraft had, it has split flaps, just like the B-17 would have. And the Stratoliner was actually, it's essentially a B-17. It has B-17 wings, same engine as the B-17. Tail structure is very similar to a B-17. It just has a wider fuselage to accommodate passengers and the pressurization system. So the wing structure, tail structure is identical to a B-17. Now, when World War II broke out, the U.S. was in need of aircraft that could make it across the Atlantic. Now, they didn't want to fly VIPs across the Atlantic on twin-engine airplanes. So the 307 was pressed into military service, and the designation for those was the C-75. So the military bought them from TWA, is where they got most of them, and I believe they pressed some of the Pan Am ones. Or no, correction, sorry, they did not press the Pan Am ones into service. They let Pan Am continue their South American routes, but they were under the jurisdiction of Air Transport Command. So they bought the airplanes from TWA, stripped them of the pressurization. It's hard word to say. Stripped them of all their sound deadening inside, and removed, I believe they removed the forward washroom, which would be the men's on a passenger configuration, and left the one in the rear, which would have been the ladies'. They did remove all of the mirrors in the ladies' washroom because that saved them weight, and they increased the takeoff weight for the C-75s. And these airplanes they used, they were the only ones they had at the time to fly across the Atlantic. The C-87 hadn't came out yet, the DC-4 hadn't reached operational status, so the C-75 was the only one they had to go across the Atlantic. And incidentally, a C-75 transported Mr. Doolittle home after the Tokyo raid. So the raid hadn't been made public yet. C-75 flew Doolittle from Karachi back to Washington, D.C. in time for that announcement to be made to the public that that raid had been carried out. And then eventually a lot of the crews that took part in that raid also came home on C-75s. Which is kind of an interesting little tidbit of history. And after the war, the C-75s were bought back by TWA and reconverted to civilian configuration, but they had to get a different certification. They got a B1 added to their name, so it would be a 307 B1 because they had to get recertified. And if I remember right, I don't think they actually added the pressurization back in. Left that off. So it's kind of ironic that the first pressurized airliner didn't end up staying pressurized. And by this time, after the war, you had the DC-4 was already out, so lots of airlines were buying the DC-4. And the DC-6, of course, came out in 47, which was also pressurized. So the 307 kind of fell into an obsolete status. And TWA got rid of their fleet in the early 50s, and Pan Am did the same. And these airplanes went to various different operators. Some went to Air France initially, and then eventually found their way into Vietnam, Laos, that area. There was stories floating around for quite some time about a second complete 307 flying Laos. That story is linked to the fact that there was several operating there. Basically all of Air France's Stratoliners that they got from TWA ended up in that area. And the last one crashed in 1975, and this is the one that there was rumors about still flying. But as far as I can tell, as far as the research I've done, it is sitting at the bottom of the Mekong River, somewhere in Laos or Thailand, on that border there. So, unfortunate fate for most of these airplanes. Most of them crashed. There was one that crashed in Corsica, crashed into a mountain there. Several crashed in Vietnam, Laos area in the 60s and 70s. And then we have, of course, the one Pan Am, so number 2003, in the Smithsonian Institute now. So there's just a brief operational history. You can find all this information in more detail out there. But thought I would share that. So this mod that we've been looking at, while the original model was for the Pan Am aircraft, it was marketed as if it was the TWA. It was marketed as if it could fly up to the 20,000 feet and still have power. And in after my initial purchase of the airplane, I tried to do that, and it wouldn't do it. I think I got it up to 16,000, maybe 17,000 feet, and the performance was truly not that good. We were looking at maybe 150 140, 130 indicated mile per hour airspeed. Just not the performance I expected to get. So this mod really wakes it up, and it gives you the TWA aircraft power with that 2-stage supercharger. Now, of course, we don't have the shift lever. If you look out there, you can find old videos of them shifting the superchargers into that second stage. They have a big lever. It looks like it's mounted on the floor next to either the pilot or the first officer. It's hard to tell in the video. It's over video, but he shifts them in the second stage, shifts all the engines in the second stage supercharger so they can reach those altitudes. And at the time, as I said, this was a revolutionary airplane. It was the first mass-produced pressurized airliner. It was not the first to have that system. There was another airplane before, but the prototype crashed and they never developed it. So this claims the title of first pressurized airliner. So we've still got a little ways to go. We've got about an hour and a half before our top of descent. So I'm just gonna kick back and relax, let you enjoy the scenery again, and we'll come back to you when it's time to descend. Top of descent here. See the shores of Lake Michigan here off our nose. So I'm going to go ahead and get it set up for our descent. Dial our altitude down here to 1,700 feet. I'm just going to go ahead and use the autopilot because it's easy. Dial this down to 1,700. I'm going to treat this just like I do the DC-6 since it's pressurized. I'm going to leave cruise power set. Right to point the nose down. Just let her go. Leave the setting there. We'll keep pulling our throttles back to maintain that 25 inches so we don't overboost our engines. 1,700 there. Let's take this down. Maybe 500 feet a minute just for now. See if that gets us what we want as far as the angle of descent. Coming into Chicago here in just a few minutes. About 36 more minutes to run. And on the course I'm in, I'm actually going to come in from the south. Should put us in position to enter the left downwind for runway 28. We're going to use runway 28 right today. It's been a pretty smooth flight other than the issues with my generators, which was on me, and the sim crashing on me, which was unfortunate. Restart, reconfigure everything, so that was fun. But overall, the improvement mod itself worked really well. Just made this an enjoyable airplane to fly. Sitting happy at 20,000 feet all day long, cruising at our 200 knots over the ground. We were burning 220 gallons per hour of cruise. Well, actually, go back to the flight engineer station here. Maybe we should be good on fuel. actually. We should land with over 100 pounds, or 100 gallons, I should say, not 100 pounds, or 100 gallons left in our mains. So that's good. So I think that's something wrong. And you can see as we're going down, our cabin pressurization working to keep up. It's descending at about, it's like 300 feet per minute. It's a nice gentle descent for our passengers. And we should end up getting unpressurized at about 8,000 feet. So that's working fantastic. Everything's looking good. Out over Lake Michigan now. See that over window there. Nice day for flying too, just a little bit of clouds. Again, just keep backing your throttles off. Keep that 25 inches. We'll gain about an inch of manifold pressure per 1,000 feet. You go down. And as with all radial engines, we're trying to keep, since we're over 140 knots right now, we're going to try to keep a 5-inch spread. So we're at 2,000 RPM, 25 inches is as low as we want to go right now. Going too fast to pull it back any further. If we do, we're gonna backload the components inside of our engine. We're gonna backload our bearings, and we're gonna backload the gears in the supercharger case, and that can cause all kinds of problems with the engine. We do not want that. We don't want to have an engine failure this far along. So dial in just a little bit more of a descent here. Let's go to 800. Otherwise, we're not going to make it where we want to go. Alright, that looks better on our profile. And we'll build a little speed, but that's okay. We'll bleed it off once we level out. Back that off. Power. Should end up over Midway here in a little bit, Chicago Midway Airport, and then we'll turn north to O'Hare, where we're gonna go. Down through 17.5. To find out if I calculate this all right. We may have to extend a little bit. We'll burn that bridge when we get there. I hope you've enjoyed this flight, found a little bit of information that you can use. Maybe you've considered dusting off 307 Stratoliner based off this flight, or you decided to buy it and download this mod. It's really a nice visual model. I mean, I really like the way it looks. You got a little bit of wear and tear going on here. The outside's beautiful, as you saw in the shots from outside of the cruise portion. It's really a nice model, but performance just was not there. It made it not very much fun to fly. Thankfully, Redgrave has made a mod that really helps out. So glad somebody finally did that. We got a long descent going here. Probably should have started it a little bit earlier. It's alright, we'll just go past our destination and turn back around so we get slowed down. You gotta plan ahead in these old airplanes. You can't just dump the throttle and drop your spoilers, point the nose down. You gotta really think ahead. About to come through 10,000 feet here. We're at 10,300. You can see our Chicago skyline just there off the nose, just barely. So here is going to be not over here. I don't see it yet through the clouds, but it's out off to our left here. I went ahead and turned to the north. Let's come through 10,000. We'll go ahead and take our landing lights on. Again, keeping an eye on our superchargers kicked off at 10,000, so we'll ease back up to 25 inches. Back on our first stage of supercharger. Everything's looking pretty good. Gonna go out over Lake Michigan here. Then we'll make a turn as we're still descending here. Fuel situation is looking okay back there. Shouldn't have a problem with it. That's good. Landed with plenty of fuel. Cloud layer here. Grab just a little bit of carb heat from my engines, just to make sure we don't get the carb ice through our cloud layer. See our carb temps coming up here. Just a second to warm them up, pull them off. Not sure how often you would actually have to use carb heat on these 1820s, because I know on the DC-3 you don't have to use it that much. There was actually an incident when the Stratoliner first came out with carb icing. I believe it was due to the fact that Boeing had restricted the intakes, or restricted the travel. I think it was the travel of the carb heat cable to keep from getting the engines too hot. And one of the aircraft actually ended up needing more carb heat, iced up, and crash landed. The airplane was able to be repaired and continue to be flown, but did ice up and cause problems. So the airline, I can't remember if it was Pan Am's airplane or TWA, they ended up modifying it so that they could get more carb heat out of it. Just gonna turn here on a reciprocal heading for our runways here. So we get out over the lake. I'm trying to go too far out. We'll end up back in Michigan for too long. I just want to have enough time to get slowed down so we can get our flaps and gear out. You're not supposed to lower the flaps above 126 miles per hour. I think you can take the gear earlier than that, so we should be okay as long as we get slowed down. Coming down through 6,000 feet right now. Go ahead and get turned around here. To the north a little bit. Got through a cloud layer, just about 6,000 feet. 5,500 anyway. Ourselves turned around here. I'm going to go ahead and tune the ILS 4. Maybe 28 right, if I can find it here. 28 right has a frequency of 111. Let's put out here. Nav radio's 111. Maybe too steep of an angle though, so we'll go ahead and start turning around. So let's turn around. Track that localizer in. That'll help us out. Ourselves on an interception course here to get back on it. Blew right through it, but that's okay. We'll get it sorted out eventually. Slowed down, which is good, that's what we want. 25 inches. Now, that skyline off to our left. It's always a cool approach into Chicago to see that skyline. Should be seeing our needle come in here in just a minute. Don't know if this is gonna work, but we're about to find out. Approach mode again. There's the runways off there, just a little to our right. Let's see what happens. I said I have not tried to do approach mode this airplane. So I don't know if it's going to work or not. So 53 on nav 1, interesting. Oh, it's on nav 2, I thought. I may just have to hand fly this, which I can do. That's fine. Just kick that off. It's fine. It's good practice anyway. Let's not descend here. Looked over at my other screen. Should not have done that. So let's go gear down. Should help us bleed some speed off. Get ourselves trimmed here. For speed bleeding off, we can go to 20 inches manifold pressure because we're below 140 knots. Mixtures can go to rich. And we'll look over here and try to get our boost pumps on here real quick. Just 4 boost pumps on. Slow them down. Put in 1 notch flaps. Below, looks like below 126. And there's our glide slope coming in. Nice. It's finally moving itself out. Alright. Hold 120 here. Another notch flaps. Should be pulled down. I think there's only, well, no, there's 3 notches. I think there was 3. There was only 2. And I'm thinking of the goose. Go full fine on our props there. Put our last notch flaps. A little high, but that's okay. We got plenty of runway. Lots of power here. So get ourselves straight down. Try to land on the mains. Just looking at DC-3. But we made it on the ground. Don't have much landing time in this old girl. Brakes. Tail wheel. That was a little rough. But we made it. Have to get some more practice landing this old girl. It's probably only the 4th time I've ever flown this airplane. Before it just wasn't very good. We'll go ahead and vacate the runway here to the right, I suppose. And taxi over to parking. We'll see you over there. We are parked up at a gate. We'll go ahead and shut this old girl down. Pull the mixture out. And shut down all 4 engines. I just have all 4 bound to one thing. We'll take our fuel pumps off. Generators come off. Turn off our avionics. Turn off our landing lights. Turn off our beacon. Nav lights can come off. And magnetos can go to off. And that's a good shutdown. We'll go ahead and open our doors here. And we'll get the refuel truck out. So that's going to do it for this flight. All the way from LaGuardia to Chicago. In total, it was about 6 hours of flying time, which back in 1940 would have been pretty quick. But in today's world, that's pretty slow. But we were doing blistering speeds for 1940. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about the Stratoliner. And if you have it, and you haven't flown it in a long time, grab that mod off flightsim.to, see what you think of it, and let me know down in the comments below if you did enjoy it, if you tried it, or if you just enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed that ride along that we did, and give me a, if you did enjoy it, give it a like. Think about subscribing if you choose to do so. But that is it for this video, and I hope you're all having a good day wherever you are. So long.